All right, we're on holding by Pirke Avos, the ethics of our fathers. That is known again. We're on holding by Pirke Avos, ethics of our fathers. Part 32, there'll be part 33, part 34, probably part 35, probably part 40. I'm seeing at the rate we're going here. So the Mishnah says, again, we're in Mishnah 2, second chapter. We're in the 16th Mishnah. And the Mishnah says, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, that an evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of other people, remove a person from this world. So we've been speaking the last number of weeks about the evil eye, and specifically about this Rabbeinu Yonah. We're going to still continue with this Rabbeinu Yonah. And that Rabbeinu Yonah says, as we've mentioned before, person unhappy with what they have. They see a friend is wealthier. They're jealous of their wealth, spouse, children, whatever it is. Causes damage to themselves, damage to others, not, very nice to be around. And as the experts of nature would say, person who desires all that their friend has contaminates a person's thoughts. They think about this all the time. And basically they're jealous, right? Basically they're jealous of what they don't have, makes them depressed, all these things. Now, so we mentioned, a number of times, why should a person ultimately care what someone else has, right? No one knows what's going on behind closed doors. People think, this person has this, has that, has the other thing. Everyone's living in the lap of luxury, or seemingly nobody has any issues. Everyone's doing great. So we know, obviously, it's not true. And we know that some people can have more issues, some people have less issues, right? Whatever it means. But, I've seen more than not. And whatever, I've spoken about this recently, but I think it's good. It's good to be spoken about again. And the essence of this whole thing is that a person has a lack of emunah. It's a lack of faith and belief in God. And it's basically saying, I'm not happy with what I have. Someone else has it better. This shouldn't be happening to me. Or, as the old adage goes, life isn't fair. Right? I can't even tell you, I'm not singling out anybody here. A lot of people say the exact same thing, right? And that is, life isn't fair. Life isn't fair. Look what I've gone through. Look at the hardship. Look at, all the difficulties, so to speak. No one else seems to have them or not as bad, but I will tell you, I read a few stories, over Shabbos, a few unbelievable inspirational stories about people converted. Now, there's a story about a woman, whatever, it's a whole long story. I'll cut to the chase. She was in Cuba. She grew up in Cuba. And she grew up in Cuba during the time of Castro. She ended up getting out. She ended up converting, or whatever. The whole long story exactly. How she met her husband, and everything to do with that. And she ends up converting, to them moving to the States, and they had a very hard time, certainly, as immigrants, and whatever. They had a number of children. And they wanted to become more religious, so to speak. So they moved to a different place. They went to a different, stronger community. Very good. And this woman's 33 years old. Husband drops dead of a heart attack. 38 years old. And he took care of everything. So she's she's lived in America for a while, so I guess she's more used to America than not. But, she's pretty much left on her own. 4 kids, doesn't remarry, right? 4 kids, I think she had. And whenever he's telling the story, what happens, later in her life, and she has all these grandkids, all these great grandkids, but she was a widow for all these years. Now you think the hardship that, they had to leave Cuba and they had to leave everything and see her parents for 22 years, and then after seeing her parents, basically sometime thereafter, her father died, mother came to live with them. Her mother lived to, I think she's almost 100, right? Whatever it is, a lot of hardship. A lot of hardship. And all the way through, you might think, well, this is my lot in life. She met this guy who wanted to marry her, and, she wasn't Jewish, and her parents didn't want, and this guy's parents didn't want, and like this whole thing, until finally, she was serious about conversion, and then they helped her, and the family accepted her, whatever it was a whole long thing. So imagine everyone thinks they have it hard, and everybody does, right? Everybody has it hard at some level, whether it's family, whether it's money, whether it's health. I just had something, whatever, crazy, crazy thing. Everything was fine, Thursday night, wake up in the middle of the night. Definitely felt sick. Thank God I didn't get sick, but I mean, I was out of commission. I was I was just like in bed the whole day. So, it wasn't as bad as what I had last year. But, so God had mercy instead of, schlepping it out 3 days where I basically didn't eat and drink, fainted a whole bunch of times from this virus, whatever, whatever it was. This only happened in one, only happened in one day. Right. And so, took some precaution, ate, basic things just to make sure, my stomach was going to be able to withstand it and whatever, things, quote unquote, go back to normal. As King Solomon says, you don't know one day to the next what's going to be. Everything's fine. Night before you wake up in the middle of the night, you don't know, right? Nobody knows. In any case, so, thank God, doing much better. Anyway, this woman seems to have a very hard life. A very, very hard life. She leaves everything she knows. She goes to the country, it's not her, English isn't her foreign, isn't her native tongue, right? So to speak, obviously it's Spanish. And, she marries this guy. They didn't have it easy. Livelihood-wise, they didn't have it easy. Other things, they didn't have it easy. Okay. So they grew through these trials. And finally, they make a decision, they have to be in a stronger place. They have to proper education for their kids, and their kids, went to school that was like 2 hours away. They were like, 3 hours on a bus back and forth. I mean, like kind of a crazy thing. But they were willing to do whatever it takes, for the sake of educating their kids and being in a stronger community, right? And all that. So that's great. That's unbelievable. And then all of a sudden, right? All of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, her husband has a heart attack, a massive heart attack. 38 years old. Right? I don't know if he's a smoker, she didn't say, or I don't remember, I don't think she said. 38 years old, this guy drops dead of a heart attack. Now you think, where's the logic in all this? Yeah, look how much she sacrificed. Look how much he sacrificed. Look what they were sacrificing for their kids. And they moved to another community, and another community, whatever, to be in a much stronger community. Okay. Right? What would be the obvious question? The obvious question would be, why do I have to go through this? Why'd you make me go, go around China and suffer and go through all the suffering? But she didn't say that. Right? She didn't say that. She kept saying all along, I mean, at least according to this article, all along what an unbelievable thing it is to be part of the Jewish people. Yeah, and no matter what happens, it's worth it. Well, very strong words. You know what they say? You got to walk the walk, you got to talk the talk. Very good. But she had a lot of adversity. She had a lot of adversity. But in the end, look what she merited. People merit unbelievable things, not when life is easy. Right? See, that we have to get out of our head, that everything should be easy, everything should be smooth. Let me reach my potential. Let me reach the potential the easy way. You know, didn't Yaakov Avinu say the same thing? Yeah, what did he say? I just want to sit and learn. He says, I want shav, I want quiet in my life. Look what he went through. Fighting with his brother, had to be by Lavan. His daughter Dinah gets taken. And when he said, you know, he confronts Esav, he goes through all these trials, all these unbelievable trials. Even if you tell me he was being judged, one of the few people who's going to be judged according to strict justice, so everything he went through was obviously much harder than other people would go through. Okay. But all he wants to do is sit and learn. That's all he wants to do. You know what? He's not going to kick back and sip pina coladas, right? That's not what he's interested in. That's not the shalva we're talking about. But he wants to have at least a little bit of quiet. Nothing major happening. So he can concentrate and learn. Serve God the way he wants, the way he's able to. Right? Doesn't King David say that in Psalm 27? We say that the entire month of El. All I want to do is Shvisi Hashem. I want to dwell in your dwelling place. I want to dwell there all the days of my life. I want to be able to sit and learn, be able to serve you the way I need to. David HaMelech have an easy life, right? King David doesn't have an easy life, right? He's got sons try to, overthrow him, all kinds of other things, always running for his life. Always running for his life. To the extent he had to fight all these wars. Because he had to fight all these wars, he wasn't worthy to build the Beis HaMikdash. He wasn't worthy to build the temple. Why not? Because he had all this blood on his hands. So, who built the temple? Who was successful? It was King Solomon. And King Solomon had it easy, relatively speaking. He didn't have to fight any wars. He had great wealth. He had all kinds of things. His father didn't. Right? His father, day in and day out, is running for his life. From his father-in-law, from his sons, right? Everybody around him. Right? Everyone wants to take a piece of him. What does King David say all the time? I'm not worthy, but you're still going to protect me. Doesn't blaspheme at all. So you're going to say, come on, my name isn't Yaakov Avinu. My name's not David HaMelech. You're right. These are very special people. Very special people. Says the Medrash, person has to say, when are my actions going to be like Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov? When am I going to be able to reach that level? Again, we're not talking in literal terms, because the source of our soul is not the same. Seemingly, they had much greater souls than we'll ever have. Okay. But on our level, we have the ability to be like them, right? We'll give an example. Avram Avinu, people say, well, the Torah says very clear, he's called Avram HaIvri. Now, people mistranslate that. They say, oh, Abraham the Jew. But he wasn't Jewish yet, right? Even if you tell me, he kept the Torah before it was given, very good. So I have to explain what that means. But essentially, he wasn't Jewish yet. So what does Avram HaIvri mean? What does Aver mean over there? It means on the other side, which means he was on one side of the world. Everybody else on the other side. What does that mean? Everyone worshipped their pocket God. They took Bob and said, here's Bob, don't leave home without her. Everyone had their pocket God. Abraham says, there's one God. It says, you spoken to you? He said, well, not yet, but I know he exists. How did he know? So at the age of 3, the age of 40, or even older, he saw there's a designer in the world. Let's say better. That the world is a world of design. Now, understanding the world of design, through nature, through the human body, right, to the heavenly body, the sun, the moon, the stars, right, realizing the sun was a little bit closer, would all be incinerated, a little bit further away, would be like frozen tundra, like Pluto, even though Pluto got demoted as a planet, doesn't really matter, right? He saw godliness in the world. He saw there is a designer. Now, there's an obligation, as Avram understood. If there's a designer, I have to worship the designer. Now, other people say, how do you know Judaism is right? We're not Christianity. Why not this? Why not that? Okay, that's not the topic here. Right? That's not the topic. We obviously believe Judaism is the truth, as it is. Now, based on that, what would I say? So I'd say very simple that Abraham came to the world, and Abraham is fighting against the entire world, right? The entire world on one side, he's on the other. So he is fighting the entire world, and he convinced a lot of them to convert, to go to his side through logic, through absolute logic. Now, at this point, you would think, okay, Abraham's known as the prince, he had a lot of wealth, all kinds of things, very good. But he had a lot of trials. Got thrown in the fiery furnace, right? By good old Nimrod. His wife gets taken. He has to fight the 5 world powers. Saves only remaining relative Lots. Right? He, circumcision. He's got to do the Akedah, right? He's got the only son that he has biologically. God wants him sacrifice. So God's like, hey, what a covenant. What do you think of my covenant? It's a beautiful covenant. Anybody could ask the question. If Abraham was so chosen, and he's the one that came to the forefront that the Ramchal says, in Derech Hashem, he is the root, he is the source. He is the fundamental source. Everyone else, the branches. Yitzchak's the branch. Yaakov's the branch. Yeah, but where did it all start from? Started from Avram. Avram, known as Avram Goyim, he's the father of all nations. Very good. So the first blessing we make, in silent meditation, Shmona Esrei, whatever you want to call it, we say Magen Avram. We say the shield of Abraham. Why not the shield of Yaakov? Why not the shield of Yitzchak? We know the Jewish people come through Yaakov. Could have said the shield of Yaakov. Why don't we say the shield of Yaakov? So one simple explanation could be that we say the shield of Abraham. Why? Because he's the one who started it. He was at the beginning. So we say, my Savosim and Abonim, the signs, the actions of our forefathers are assigned to their children, meaning that what they go through and the difficulty and hardship they have, they put in the world the ability for their grandkids, great-grandkids, and all generations. They put the ability for them to stick up for themselves also. To be able to be strong. Because otherwise, we have any trials and tribulations. How are we able to pass them? Seemingly impossible. Right? Seemingly impossible. That's what we would say. So how's the only way? What's the possible way we can fight them at any level? Is because we have a connection of Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. If we didn't have a connection of Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, it'd be impossible. Now, even though the trials and tribulations we go through seem impossible, 100%, they may seem like, you don't know which way to turn. Left is right, right is left. You have no idea what to do. Where you have to realize, that we're offspring of them. And what they went through can help us go through what we need to go through. So the obvious question is, but I'm not Avram. I've said this many times, certainly about myself. Yeah? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think you are. You have that potential. And we all have that potential inside if we want to grab it. But the only way we have that potential and the ability to fight against whatever's around us, the only way is because Avram went through it first. Avram went through that fiery furnace. Avram went through that test. Yitzhak went through that test. Through them and their ability to withstand the test, they put that into the world. Yeah, so we have an ability to tap in. Now, obviously, people are going to say, well, that's good for them. Well, that's not so easy. We have our own tests. You're right. We're on a much lower level. Imagine Avram goes out and he takes 318 men, right? As the Torah says, 318 men to fight the 5 world powers. Now, gematria of 318 is the name Eliezer. Eliezer's trusted servant. Right? So some say it was just him and Eliezer. And they wiped out 5 nations. 5 unbelievable nations. Right? The world powers at that time. What am I going to do? I'm going to save my relative. And who told Avram? Who told Avram that Lot was being taken captive? Og Melech HaBashar. Good old Og, king of Bashan. He survived the flood. He was hanging outside the ark when the flood came. Question how he survived. Very good. Why did he tell Avram? Why did he tell Avram that Lot got taken? Because he knew Avram would fight to save it. And what did Og have in the back of his mind or the front of his mind? His wife, right? One of the most beautiful women in the history of man, right? Sorry, Menu. Still not in comparison, to Chava, to Eve, but nonetheless, one of the most beautiful women in the world. So he says, I'll tell Avram, I'll tell Abe, I'll tell him, Lot's been taken. And Abe will go fight for him. Because that's his family. That's what you do for family. You fight for family. Right? Not always, but okay, that's what Avram did. And he knew he was going to do that. But he had an ulterior motive. He had a great ulterior motive. Avram's going to go to war. What's going to happen? He's probably going to die. And if he dies, very good. I'll take his wife. Yeah. I'll be your husband. Perfect plan. Only one problem with the plan. Abraham didn't die. Yeah. But imagine, he feels responsible. This is what he has to do. This is one of the tests. Now, there's a good question here. Did he have to go or not? Put himself in a dangerous situation. Even before the Torah was given. Right? Certainly one of the Noahide laws would be, you don't have to put your life in danger if you know you're going to get killed. If you know there's a good chance you're going to get killed, that's forbidden, even for a non-Jew. Because again, a non-Jew has to keep laws that are logical according to the Torah. Now, would that make sense? It makes sense in movies, right? But in real life, yeah, you're going to fight the major world powers. You were going to fight the major world powers and come out unscathed and save your wife. And save your nephew. Whoever it is, doesn't matter. Save his cousin, relative, whatever it is. It's a suicide mission. That's what it sounds like. Now, do you have an obligation to go through a suicide mission to save a relative, even if it's your spouse or a child? Who says? Right? Maybe try and ransom him, But then you run into other problems because if you ransom them off, then they'll take other people and ransom them. That's how people become rich, right? And that's the whole question of, when you're bartering for, let's say, for soldiers' lives, and they want to ransom, we'll give them back, but you give us 1,000, 1,000 prisoners, 1,000 terrorists. That's what happened with Gilad Shalit, right? 1,000 prisoners, one of them with blood on their hands. One of them, by the way, who came out in this exchange was Sinwar, right? Who organized this horrific thing on October 7th. So, according to Torah, it's problematic. It's problematic. But anyway, according to law, you shouldn't be allowed to do that, right? Even today, you shouldn't do that, right? But it comes out because there are a number of other factors involved, and that probably goes by the wayside. But still, what's the problem here? The problem is if you give in to blackmail, which that's what it is, and they're going to say, okay, we're going to take we got one of your soldiers, 2 of your soldiers, whatever it is. We got all these captives. You're going to give us what we want. And if you don't, we'll just kill them or let them rot or, whatever. And these maggots still have people that are dead. These idiots are holding on to people that are dead because they know they're valuable. Why they're valuable? Because certainly for the families, want closure, want Jewish burial. Yeah, and they'll give anything for that. I can't blame a parent for that. Certainly not. But they're the only, they're the few, if any, are going to hold this as the bargaining chip, which, just goes to show who you're dealing with. But in general, I don't want to get caught up in politics here, but in general, this is why it's forbidden. This is why the Mishna says you're not allowed to do this. Because they're going to keep doing it. And they're going to keep ransoming. And then what's going to happen? It's a vicious cycle. Right? So you don't give in. Right? So again, there are other factors today that would say, even though that is the case, you might have to pay a severe price. You still might have to do it. Right? It's a very good chance you still have to do it. Right? Regardless of what the Mishnah and the Gemara say. Right? There are other factors probably override it. But there's good reason why not to. All right. So based on that, would a Jew or a non-Jew, right? We'll make this simple. Would a Jew or a non-Jew have an obligation to go in, save their cousin from the 5 world powers? No, absolutely not. Now, nobody says it's a suicide mission. Right? Nobody says that. They said that was one of his tests. No one says it was a suicide mission. Right? It's kind of interesting. Yeah. That it wasn't that if he would have died, if he would have been killed in battle, let's say, right? And he was a great warrior as well. Would that have meant if he died, that would have been called suicide? That's a good question. You can say the same thing by the Maccabees. Maccabees fight against the Greeks. These are a bunch of Kohanim, yeshiva students. What do they know about war? They're fighting the world power. The Greeks, that time, were the world power. They're going to say, kind of like the Americans against the British, right? They're going to hide behind the rocks, ambush them, do all kinds of things. Yeah, it took them a long time. Took a long time to get rid of the Greeks. But what if they would have fallen in bed? What if they would have been annihilated over a short amount of time? Or even a longer period of time, whatever, it doesn't matter. Why was that not considered a suicide mission? You're going to say, what do you mean? They stuck they stuck a pig on the temple altar, right? So the Maccabees said this means war, right? Even if we die, we can't allow them to do that. It's a desecration of our temple. Yeah, that's we got to stick up for God over here. Okay, why there's a suicide mission? If they would have been killed, you could ask the same question, same exact question. Why is this not considered suicide? So the answer given, in general, is they believe with all their hearts they were doing it for the sake of heaven. And because they're doing it for the sake of heaven, not a tinge of revenge or anything else, they're doing it for God's honor, God's going to protect them. Now you can say, well, that's foolish. Right? Who says God's going to protect them? Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Okay. So when we're at their level, we're at their level, we'll understand. But then things, they get rid of the Greeks over time, which is in itself a miracle, not to mention the miracle of Hanukkah. But what happened to the Maccabees, just in general? They took over kingship. Now, the problem with taking over kingship is they didn't come from the tribe of Yehuda. Right? So there's also another question. So you could say they did it as an interim thing, waiting for someone with the tribe of Yehuda to come, whatever. They did it as an interim thing. They didn't mean to really take over, whatever, but they took over for a certain amount of time. Right? But they weren't allowed to. They usurped power, let's say. So let's say, we took out the Greeks, so to speak. So we want to make some order. So we'll take over the day-to-day things, and then eventually we'll straighten it out. So you can say, what's wrong with that? Well, look at the self-sacrifice. So the Gemara said, so what happened? What happened? Get cut to the chase. So the Maccabees and all their descendants were destroyed. So far so that the Gemara says, anyone who says that they come from that lineage is an Eved, is a slave. In other words, they're totally decimated. Totally decimated. Now, there's another question. I mean, it's part of the same question, really. And that is, look at the self-sacrifice. Look what they did over here. They sacrificed themselves to get the Greeks out, and they were successful. Right? They were successful. Very good. Yeah, they got them out. They spent, I think, more than a year. Right? They tremendous self-sacrifice. So you say, where's the payback? Where's the payback? Look what they did. They got rid of the Greeks. Very good. Everyone ecstatic. The Greeks are gone. But you want to tell me they forgot about where kingship comes from? How do you forget that? They weren't fools. So it could be they thought that in this case, okay, they'll organize things, whatever it may be. And then, got to understand. Got to understand within a certain amount of time, whatever. We're not here to reinvent the wheel, right? To reinvent things over here. The Torah makes very clear. The scepter will never leave the tribe of Judah. Kingship comes from Judah. So anyone who's going to claim to be from the Davidic line to be the Messiah, it's going to be the king. It's going to come from the tribe of Judah. That's the way it's going to be. How are we going to know, right? Question always comes up, people ask. How are we going to know? Because comes Elijah the prophet. The prophets tell us. He's going to announce it. How does Elijah know? We don't have to ask that question. Elijah knows, right? How are we going to know it's Elijah the prophet? It's going to be clear. It's going to be very, very clear who he is. Yeah. In either case, without even getting into that. They thought they wanted to reinvent the wheel. And they thought they knew better. And they thought God's going to overlook this. Because look what they did. Look at their self-sacrifice. So I'll tell you another story, right? Answer with another story. This famous story with Rav Cheskel Abramsky, a blessed memory. He was the head of the Beis Din in London many years ago, and he ended up, his last years living in the land of Israel. So Marib was very close to him. And Rav Abramsky told the following story. There was during the war, he had a connection to a pilot that on a daily basis, did bombing raids against the Germans. So one day, he sees this pilot and asks him how he's doing. He says, thank God. And he said, how are you doing religiously? With everything going on. So he says, I'll tell you the truth. He says, I keep Shabbos, right? Still keep Shabbos, keep kosher. But on Shabbos, because of all the stress, I smoke. I smoke on Shabbos. So the pilot says, but God's going to understand. God's going to understand. How's he going to understand? So he says, I'm risking my life on a daily basis. So God's going to, since I'm risking my life to save Jews, God's going to understand and look the other way on that. Says Rav Cheskel Bronsky, a blessed memory, no, you're making a mistake. The merit you're going to get for saving Jews and risking your life, that's unbelievable merit. That's true. But it does not offset the fact of what you did. Right? In other words, it doesn't offset the fact you smoke on Shabbos. Smoking on Shabbos, I understand why you may do it. But how does that, you're going to get punished for that. One thing does not offset the other. The reward you're going to get, unbelievable reward for risking your life, beautiful. Yeah, but it doesn't offset over here. And there'll be what to pay because you smoke on Shabbos. Not a question God will understand or not understand. In other words, is the Torah true or it's not? If it's true, I have to abide by it. I don't make up my own games, my own reasoning, my own ideas. We don't put our own ideas into Torah. That's called Torah made in my own heart. Yeah, Torah made up in my own mind. If it's true, I gotta follow it to the nth degree, to the best of my ability. If a person would say, well, the last Mishnah is in Yuma, at the end of Tractate Yuma, which talks about Yom Kippur, if a person would say, I'm going to sin and then I'm going to repent. I'm going to sin, I'm going to repent, says the Mishnah over there, you have no chance of repentance. Gemara concludes you have no chance of repentance. Why? One thing does not offset the other. You transgressed, you have to repent, but you can't do it on purpose. You can't say, since I know there's repentance, God's going to understand, so I'm going to do what I want, and then I'll repent. That doesn't work. And under any circumstance, it doesn't work. Now, there are cases, I don't really harp on this, it's more complicated. There are cases where it's better to transgress something minor than to come on to a major transgression. A lot of the laws of Shabbos are based on that premise. In other words, we have a lot of the Torah prohibitions of the laws of Shabbos are dependent on what was done in the Mishkan, what was done in the tabernacle. Almost everything else is rabbinic. Why? Because anything similar to what was done in the Mishkan and the tabernacle is going to be forbidden by the rabbis. Why? Because you might forget it, Shabbos. Or you'll say, well, this isn't what they meant. They only meant this. But if you forget, then you might come to a worse prohibition. Right? A lot of commentaries speak about this. Gemara speaks about it at the beginning of Tractate Shabbos. Right? You do whatever you can to make sure you don't come to a worse prohibition. We see that by the laws of kashrus. Right? What's the prohibition of mixing milk and meats? The prohibition is when it's kosher meat and kosher milk. What about kosher meat and non-kosher milk? What about non-kosher milk and and what about kosher milk and non-kosher meat? What about chicken? Those are all rabbinical. Now, why is chicken rabbinical? Because the person's going to say chicken was never on the entree, so to speak. Chicken was never mentioned. It says meat. What does meat normally mean? Red meat. So why say chicken? Because you might think, oh, chicken and milk is permissible, therefore milk and meat is permissible. Again, what is that saving a person from? A worse prohibition. But what if someone says, I'm never going to make that mistake? Right? So the Torah's not talking just to you. The Torah's talking to everybody. Right? Everybody may told me this many times. You think this decree was made, whatever, and it doesn't apply to you. He goes, I'm going to tell you it applies to you. It also applies to you. Don't think it doesn't apply to you. I'm like, you sure? He goes, I'm pretty sure, yeah. Right? So these things are going to, you're going to think, oh, it doesn't apply. This won't apply to me. Yeah? Someone asks, fish and milk, depends. If you're Sephardic, you don't eat fish and milk. You don't eat a bagel with lox, if you're Sephardic. Right? Ashkenazim eat fish and milk together. Right? Now, it could be based on a mistranslation, because all throughout the laws of milk and meat, normally it says basar v'chalav. Usually it says basar means meat, milk is chalav, right? Usually it says milk and meat. In a certain place, it says fish and meat. Now many say that was just a misquote. It was a misprint, because the whole thing is talking about milk and meat. So therefore, many would say, no, it's talking about milk and meat. Fish and milk is fine, right? But if you hold like Sephardic tradition, where they're going to say it was fish and milk. So according to Sephardic tradition, which is most likely, those people will not eat fish and milk together, right? Therefore, it only applies to them. Ashkenazim eat it. Ashkenazim have no problem eating. That's part of my Friday lunch, right? A roll usually with cheese, with lox. Yeah, we're big into that. Yeah, but if you're Sephardic, there's an issue. Ashkenazim is not a problem. Ashkenazim, we don't worry about it. No cheesy chicken chili. Nope. Anything mixed milk and chicken gonna be forbidden unless it's fake cheese. Then I mean there is cheese. There is cheese that is farty, right? I'm saying if it's again cheese and milk is for Ashkenazim also. Why is across the board? It's cheese and milk. Cheese and milk is the issue. Or sorry, fish and milk is the issue. Yeah. The only problem is fish and milk. Chicken and milk, according to everybody. Right? According to Sephardic, Ashkenazim, Hasidim, they all hold it's forbidden. Right? The only question is fish and milk. Right? That's that's the issue. So you have things, you have as we said before, things are done in order that you don't come to a worse transgression. Comes up in the laws of Shabbos a lot, comes up in the laws of Kashrus, many laws, many laws are there to make sure you don't come on to worse prohibitions. The whole thing about separate dishes. Yeah, separate pots, separate silverware, cutlery, wherever you're from, is to make sure nothing mixes so you don't have any problems. Right. And, again, the serious problems are going to be where, you have things that are piping hot. The only time you're going to have something, it's really problematic is if you have a transfer of heat or something spicy. Right. Let's say a, what's it called? An onion. Right. If you use a knife, if you use the knife where it wasn't used within 24 hours, whether it's a milk knife or a meat knife, doesn't really matter. Not used within 24 hours, that means the taste is stale. If you use it on an onion, that onion is sharp. The sharpness goes into the knife. So therefore, even if the knife wasn't used within 24 hours, I cannot use it for the opposite. Meaning, if I have a meat knife not used within 24 hours, and now cuts an onion, I cannot use that onion to eat with dairy. Or if I use a dairy knife and I cut an onion, with a dairy knife, even not used within 24 hours, according to Ashkenazic and Sephardic tradition, we don't discriminate. You cannot use that onion for meat, right? What's the reason? Two things. One is the sharpness of the onion and the pressure you put on the knife, right? Because most likely you're going to put on pressure to cut the onion, right? Doesn't matter how much pressure. Right? There's pressure of the knife, there's the sharpness of the onion, right? But in any case, there are a lot of laws that are rabbinical in nature, it doesn't really matter, that are going to save you from a worse prohibition, right? They're going to save you from a worse prohibition. Someone asks, how are the pots marked? Doesn't really matter. Some people don't mark them, they're just totally different, And they know one is for milk, one is for dairy, right? What they could do, they could put on stickers, put on M for meat, D for dairy, could do that, or P for parv. I never tell anyone to keep anything parv, which is neither milk or meat because it never stays parv, right? Yeah, all of a sudden you're using, let's say, pot to cook spaghetti, but you're not putting anything in it. All of a sudden you throw in, you forgot, you threw in cheese. Thing is now piping hot. Guess what? Your pot's now a cheese pot. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying Kaufman's law is most people make mistakes. Most people are not careful. Things that are parv never stay parv. You can try. You can definitely try. You don't have to, you definitely don't have to believe me, but usually things that are parv don't stay parv. They definitely don't stay parv. Someone asks how these different items designated. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter how they're designated. If they look different, right? I would buy different things. That they absolutely look different. You'll tell that they're different pots, different plates, different colors, right? You label them. I would say if you got, plates that, you want to use for meat, if you eat meat, they should be reddish color or something you're going to remember their meat. You can label them. 100%, you can label them. Right? Silverware, the same thing. Not all silverware or cutlery is created equal. Yeah. So the easiest way is you have different, someone here mentions, different color pots and pans. Yeah. You know what? Sometimes you also forget, right? I have certain things that I always have to ask, what is this? I don't remember. Pass over year to year sometimes also. If you don't label it, you're not sure. You got to remember what you used it for. So yeah, if you have different colors, that's easier, 100%. Blue is for dairy. Red is for meat, right? Again, you can use different colors. You can use yellow. You can use, I don't know, pink, polka dot. I don't know. It doesn't matter, right? As long as they're not LGBTQ, right? Whatever. Use colors to know what the difference is, right? White can be for dairy. That's very simple. Red for meat, right? But if they have different colors, hopefully a person remember that obviously one is one is the other. Again, they do make, what do you call it? They do make stickers as well, that you can, you can place on them, place on the end of the pots, right? I mean, if you place them, somewhere else, they'll get washed away. But you put them on the end of a pot, you could do that. Yeah, in general, that's one way to do it. But again, different colors, very good, right? That would make the most sense. That would make the most sense. Now, if you're Sephardic, I'll save you a lot of money. You can buy all glass. Because according to Sephardic tradition, glass doesn't absorb. So you can use it for milk and for meat. All you have to do is wash it off. I wouldn't tell people to do that if you're Ashkenazic. Certainly, it's for Ashkenazim, it's forbidden. 100% forbidden. If you're Sephardic, you can do it, save a lot of money, right? Then you don't have to worry. 100%, you don't have to worry. And therefore, since according to Sephardic tradition, it never absorbs. So no matter how hot you put, I don't know, let's say lasagna. You put hot lasagna, right, on your dairy plate. Very good. And then the next day, so you wash it off. And the next day, what do? Put a burger on it, right? Nice meat burger on it. Very good. Yeah, any problem if you're Sephardic? No. Why not? I don't have to wait 24 hours. I don't have to kosher it. Right? It's beautiful. Why? There's no problem. According to Sephardic tradition, it does not absorb. According to Ashkenazic tradition, we wouldn't do it. Right? Absolutely, we wouldn't do it. Why not? We hold it absorbs. Right? We hold it absorbs. Now, there is a question, just throw this out there. There is a question, according to Sephardic tradition, where they hold that it doesn't absorb. Yeah, can you use those same dishes, save a lot of money? Yeah, and a lot of aggravation, moving things around. Can I use those same dishes for Passover? Now that many Sephardic rabbinic authorities hold no. They hold, even though we hold really doesn't absorb, when it comes to chametz, any leavened product, we don't mess around, just get new dishes. Even if you want to get glass dishes, doesn't matter. Yeah? But because of chametz and how severe the prohibition of eating a leavened product, we don't want to take any chances. Right? But during the year, you can do that if you're Sephardic. Save a lot of money. Right? If not, what do? You buy separate colors. Separate colors is the easiest way. Right? That is definitely the easiest way. Yeah, someone here mentions. So then we use coconut milk for our desserts. Okay. All right, someone asked before, we're on this topic. Once they are cleaned and then mikvah, are they then able to be redesigned? Yeah. Yeah, if they're koshered, right? Any pots and pans you may use now, right? They're going to be treif anyway, even if everything you make is 100% kosher, right? There's a rabbinic issue, and you have to kosher it anyway. So someone told me, and this is why you got to be careful where you get information from. Someone told me that their mentor, or whatever you want to call them, their rabbi told them they're going to go with them, they're going to buy all new things, and they're going to go with them to the mikveh. They're going to go to the mikveh, and everything's going to be great. So I told them, well, you can do that, but it's not going to help you. They said, why? So I told her exactly this. This is the reason it's not going to help. Because no matter what you cook on it, if you cook from beginning to end, you can't eat it. Yeah? But not only that, if you use it for yourself and you cook, Yeah. And no Jew has anything to do with the cooking, right? So that makes it forbidden. That makes it forbidden. So therefore, you'd have to kosher it anyway. So there's no point to buy anything brand new now. If you want to, you can. But you're going to have to re-kosher it before you go to the mikveh. Before you take it to the mikveh, after conversion, you're going to have to kosher the pots and pans. You can do that. They can be kosher. That's not a problem. But to go out and buy brand new ones now, I wouldn't tell anyone to do it. Even for Passover, you want to practice, fine. You can still use your own things, right? You're just practicing separating milk and meat even on Passover. Very good, right? Go out and buy new ones. You have to kosher them. Not hard to do. Definitely not hard to do, but you have to do it, right? So I asked this person, I said, then what would be the point? I said, what would be the point? Someone's going to take you, right? They're going to be very generous. They're going to buy you a set, I don't know, a set of 4, milk and meats and glasses and all that. Very good. Well, glasses are an easier problem, right? They're much less of a problem, right? But again, pots, pans, what do you call it? Dishes, silverware, beautiful. What does that help you? If it's glass and you're Sephardic, it'll help. Yeah, the pots and pans won't help. So Kaufman's law is get your information from someone who knows what they're doing. And I told this person straight out, I would not trust, I'm not going to say who it is, but I said I would not trust 1 second what this person knows. Yeah, you want to listen to him, it's your choice. I'm telling you, he's going to waste time and money to kosher your things when they don't need to be kosher. When there's no point to do it, you're going to have to kosher it anyway. There are 2 things. You have to kosher it because it's treif, right? Whatever you cook in it. And then you have to go to the mikveh. So how'd that help you? How'd that help you? They're like, oh, that's a good point. I was like, no, it's not just a good point. Whether you take my classes, you don't take my classes, it doesn't matter. The point is go to someone else to get information from. I said, that's my point. They're like, okay, I'll take it into consideration. Okay? But you have people telling you that. Kind of like the blind leading the blind. They might be well-intentioned. I met a lot of well-intentioned people who don't know a lick about anything. And they should keep their big mouth shut. Again, I'm not saying I know everything about everything, but this I know. That's pretty clear. Now, how come it's not clear to that person? Good question. Maybe never learned it. I don't know. Maybe no one taught it. Working with converts is a pretty special thing. Pretty specific thing. So there are things, if you learned the laws of kashrut, you would have learned it. Most likely you would have learned. Yeah? Learned a lot of this. I was learning Tractate of Odazar. All about adultery and different things, and non-kosher milk and a non-Jew season and whatever, like all these things. So when I learned it. Soup to nuts. I learned it. Okay, maybe certain things I don't remember so well, this, that, okay. But, the facts are what they are. You got to be very, very careful. Again, it doesn't matter. Take my class, someone else's classes, they have to know what they're doing. They have to know what they're doing. And if someone tells you that, oh, I'll go buy you pots and pans, and I'll take care of it, I'll make sure they're all kosher, for what? For what purpose? I can understand, let's say, and I know this happens, so I'm gonna give them, the benefit of the doubt. Let's say, someone's in the process of conversion. Rabbi comes out and says, we're gonna kosher your kitchen. Now, Kaufman would say there's no point. Why are you going to waste your time? Now it's 100% kosher. Let's say, they burn off the grill, they burn out the oven, they do all these, take a blowtorch or whatever. They burn everything off. That's beautiful. The second you take a pot, even if it's a kosher pot, whatever you put in it can be totally vegetarian. I don't care what it is. Whatever you put in it, you just trace the pot up. Whatever you put in the oven, you just trace it up. So how does that help? So again, people are well-meaning. They say, well, we want you to have a kosher kitchen. That's beautiful. But what happens the day after? What happens a second later? You cook something where no Jew has any interaction with it. What happens? You just totally trace it up. So what's the point of doing it? It's a nice gesture. I'm not saying I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt here. It's a nice gesture. Beautiful. Practically speaking, you didn't do anything. Practically speaking, a person's going to come and mess it up the first second they cook. And it doesn't matter what they cook. They can be totally parve. Doesn't have to be meat at all. Yeah, they stick something in the oven. Same thing. You traced it up. You traced it up. If you're Jewish, it's one thing, right? After you convert, they come, they kosher everything, your pots and your pans, they kosher. You go to the mikveh, you toivel them, right? You do tefillas kelim, beautiful. That's beautiful, but you do it the right way. Why? The world wastes time. There's no point. Now, someone will tell me you can't say that because it makes people feel good. Now the house is kosher. Okay. What's it worth? It becomes straight away. It's like the same thing. I know I'll get in trouble for saying this also. There's some Noahides out there that get a certificate. Say they're a Noahide. Right? Okay, very good. If they're doing it, it makes them feel better. Okay. Is it worth the paper it's written on? No. Does it do anything for the Beis Din? No. Maybe it makes them some money. I don't know. But what does it do? It makes the person feel good. Okay. If a person wants to do it, they can do it. Someone asks me, is it worthwhile doing it? Depends. Right? Normally, I would say it's not worth it. But if a person feels good, they have this certificate on their wall, signed by the Beis Din, okay. For some people, it's worth something. It gives them the impetus to go forward because they have this. Now they're taking on the Noahide laws. Very good. They don't have to do it. Isn't it a good thing if they take on the Noahide laws in front of a witness or two witnesses? Yes. That's a good thing. Making a declaration. Do I have to go in front of a Beis Din? No. Do I have to get a certificate? No. Well, why would someone do it? The only reason someone would do it is it gives them strength. And it makes them feel good about their, what they're doing in the world. Okay. Doesn't change anything. You'll tell me, inner strength is worth something. And it's worth a lot. Okay. I'm not denying that. I'm always saying, other than that, is it worth it to do it? No. Doesn't do anything. Good to have, maybe. I hear people, a number of people tell me I paid for these classes. Being a Reformed Jew, there's nothing around me, and that's what I'm going to do. But it's not recognized. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people. Yeah. And it goes around the same thing, but I already paid for the classes. Right? My answer always is, okay, so you gave bad charity. You gave money to a bad charity. Okay, move on. But it's not going to be recognized. But that's all I have. Okay, if I say abracadabra, does that mean I disappeared? Anyone remember the old TV series Soap? And I remember the Billy Crystal, years ago, many years ago. So one of the characters, would always say, would turn himself invisible, right? He'd go, shh. It's like, I'm invisible. I'm standing right there. And everybody sees him, right? And everybody sees him. It's like the funniest thing is like, okay, I'm not dealing with this. I'm going invisible. It's like, shh. But he's still there. It's not like the Flintstones. Someone disappears, the Great Gazoo. He comes, he goes, and this and that, and he disappears. Okay. Wait, that's fantasy, right? It's a cartoon. Very good. We'll get into cartoons. Yeah. But this guy is like, 40-year-old guy. It's like, oh, I disappeared. Really? You're standing right in front of me. I can punch you right in the nose. Right? You're like an idiot. Right? But that's the whole thing. It was funny. Yeah. In any case, I don't want to digress. That's what it's like. But people can't get out of their heads. But I paid for it. But it's not recognizable. That degree, diploma, whatever, certificate, I could use it to blow my nose with or other things. Yeah, I could have used it the other night. Thank God I didn't throw up, but whatever. That's what it's worth. People are too stuck up on this idea. I want to be a Jew at any cost. Yeah, what about the cost that you're not really considered a Jew by most people? Or at least by the Orthodox community? Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But there are people that believe in the truth, so why do it? Because that's all I have. That's not an excuse. So what if it's all you have? Yeah, either Kaufman's law is you do it right or don't bother. To have the name and not be recognized, it's foolish. You can come to Israel that way, in the way of, the law of return, and then have a proper conversion. I wouldn't tell people to do that, right? It'd be a lot easier. But I wouldn't tell people to do that. Yeah, Kaufman called it a mockery of a sham. But most people would say it's all I have around me. So I want to have the name. Okay? Invisible. But you still see me. Too bad. All right? That would be my answer. That is my answer. And some people say, okay, you're right, but this is what I'm doing. Okay. Right? But it's gonna nod them. They gotta realize there are a lot of things, that don't make sense. Yeah, and a lot of things they don't hold us. You signed up for it. Yeah, but I didn't know. But now you know. Now you know. Now you understand a little bit better. But it's already paid for, so I have to go through the classes. No, you don't. See, this is what the evil inclination's done. Yeah, just go through it because that's making you feel better. Right? We shouldn't waste the money. Okay, so I have the certificate. Now what? Now, if you're telling me you're doing that, you're going to upgrade and you have no choice, whatever it is, okay. But if you have a choice, okay, they're not gonna refund your money. So what do you do? What do you do in such a case? You got one or two choices. I don't see any other choices, right? You got one or two choices, right? Either you just go through with it and you do it, and that's it. Or you chalk it up to bad experience and you move on. And you lost money. Because there's no point of getting bad education. Why don't get a real education, from whoever's going to give it to you, than to go through this and be messed up because of it. And start to think things that aren't true. It makes people like me, their jobs harder, right? Re-squeegee the brain. I don't know how I got onto this. But again, the point, the point is, if you're going to do it, you do it right. Yeah, if you're not going to do it, I would say don't bother. No one said you have to convert. No one said you have to go through the hardship. You want to? Okay. Yeah, you want to have an easier conversion? Good, go the other way. It's not going to be recognized. But it's not going to be recognized. That's the killer, right? That's the kicker over here, is that people like that understand. But they say, what can I do? Well, I got an obvious answer. Don't do it. That's what you can do. But I can't move for a while. Okay, so you can't move, but at least go in the right direction. Don't keep spinning your wheels. You want to spin your wheels? Spin your wheels. It's your choice, right? It's your choice. Yeah, let me take some questions here. Teflon, very good. Teflon, yeah, Teflon can be a problem only because when you have Teflon, what's the issue? Teflon, the issue is they can put some they put some smearing on it. Yeah, it had to be kosher. It should be kosher anyway. Some things like, some Teflon things I think need to be kosher. But yeah, I mean, it can be kosher though. Even if someone messes it up, doesn't mean it can't be kosher, right? If it's something that can be, right? You don't say I have to, throw it in the garbage. It's your choice, but most likely, if something got messed up, most likely it can't be kosher. Yeah. So again, glass for Sephardim works out very good. Yeah. For Ashkenazim, it's a problem, right? But if you're Sephardic, glass is the easiest way to go. It's definitely the easiest way to go. But I still think it would be better to have separate, not just to rely on glass altogether. But you could, right? It just makes it easier, right? Glasses you're not going to have an issue with. Glasses are much easier, right? That you're going to have very little issue with, right? Unless you put something put something dairy, or I'm not going to put something meat, but like something dairy in a glass that's hot, maybe. Yeah. What do you call it? Hot milk, let's say, in coffee or something like that. That could be. Right, that could be, but otherwise, you're not gonna put meat in, most likely in glasses, you're not gonna have an issue. Mugs you'll have, you could have an issue with, making it dairy, whatever, but usually with glass is probably not a problem. But again, glass stuff and silverware, as long as it's cleaned, and it's cleaned well, so it shouldn't be a problem. Right? It should be, it should be a problem either way. But I would tell people certainly at the beginning it's easier. Certainly if you're Sephardic, it's easier to use to use glass, right? Even Ashkenazim, if you only had glass, okay, whatever you have, a person wants to practice, you take 2 and 2 or whatever and split them. Say one's going to be meat, one's going to be dairy, so you get other stuff. Right, but in any case, any of these things, after conversion, have to be kosher. So remember, it doesn't help. You can kosher as much as you want. You go to the mikveh as many times as you want. It doesn't change anything. You give it to a Jew, it doesn't change anything. Yeah, because once you get it back and you cook, that's the problem, right? Yeah, let me see. Someone asks, oh, hard question. See if I can give a good answer. Someone asks, I'm a gum chewer. Said something's not really okay. Chew appetite, you like to chew gum. Is it problematic? English rabbi says it's not that great. We look like a cow. Okay, I'm glad someone said it before me. Yeah, it sort of brings me comfort. I tend to have stomach aches. Problem with chewing gum is exactly that. If you can chew in an inconspicuous way, I would say it's definitely better. The problem is, as this English rabbi said, I don't know what you're talking about, but it doesn't really matter. I would have said the exact same thing. That is, people chew gum like cows. And there's no good way to say it. If the person needed to chew gum, let's say because they want to stop smoking, so they chew gum. Okay. But I can tell you that I do see women who chew gum, just kind of hard to miss. And they're not inconspicuous. And they look like cows. You're right. You're right. So you're gonna say, well, what if I need to chew gum? So don't chew gum like a cow. But if you chew gum like a cow, then I can't really help you. It's the way people chew gum in general. Yeah, that's just the way people, and men are no different, by the way. Can also chew gum. Just looks, I think it looks worse for a woman. For a guy, okay, because I'm a guy, I guess. But I think that I don't think guys look any better, as well. So simple answer is, if you need to chew gum, don't chew like a cow. Try and be inconspicuous, right? But it's kind of hard because when you're chewing, you don't really think and whatever. But it does make you look like a cow. Again, I'm not discriminating against women. I think men are. I don't think men are any better. If they chew gum. But usually, I think women stick out more than men. For that. Yeah, good. Something that chew gum in private. Good, right? So you can look like a cow to yourself. Okay, that's good. I'll take that. Yeah, a lot of people. It's a lot of people. I would say it's. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter, men or women. I just think it looks worse on women. I think it looks worse in women than men. But anyone who chews gum in general, look at yourself in the mirror. I think you're gonna say I look like a cow. So that's your answer. So good. So someone takes care of that problem, right? So if you're gonna chew gum, you do it in private. Okay. That's definitely better. Well, that would be definitely better. I think if I chew gum, all my teeth would fall out. So I don't want to have that problem. But I mean, I see it. How often do I see it? I see it enough. When you take buses, you see a lot of things. Yeah, that's everyone on their phones that you see. And see how people eat sometimes, or how people talk sometimes, or chew things sometimes. Yeah, it's kind of nauseating. But I'm not even talking about kids. That's a whole other thing. But I'm talking about adults. It's again, I'm not so big into externals, but it says a lot. It says a lot how a person dresses, how they keep themselves, how they speak, and how they chew gum. Right? It does show. It does show. So good. Do it in private. Good. If you do it in public, I would just say don't be, try and be inconspicuous. But it's kind of hard when you're chomping along. So if you can chomp along, you don't open your mouth that much, okay. But it's I'm not gonna say it's impossible. Definitely not gonna say it's impossible, but I would say it's definitely problematic. Somebody asks, new set of tableware. It's still in the package. Good. So someone asked, should I keep it and not use it? Right. What's the point? You're gonna have to reconsure it. Right? Anything you get new, save it. That's what I would tell you. There's no point to use it. Right? Nothing. There's no point to use anything that's new. Whatever you have now is good. You want to buy some other things, okay. Realize whatever you buy needs to be kosher. It's not a big deal to kosher, right? But it's just I think it's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. Or really, right now, it's a waste of money. If you need to buy new things, okay, right? But just realize you're gonna have to kosher it anyway, right? And if you want to buy glass and you're Ashkenazic, so you have to kosher it also, right? So glass doesn't help you that much, right? So if you don't want to use glass, corningware, Pyrex, white ovenware is what we use for meats. Okay. Dairy blue, right? Very simple, right? You have things that are meat. You make them, they can be red or corningware or something like that, and dairy's blue. It's very easy to get different color, right? Very, very easy, and that takes care of most of the problem, right? The only question is going to be if you use things that are parve, that are neither milk or meat. That's where you're going to run into the problem, right? And a lot of times, even if you label them, Kaufman's law is that they end up either being milk or meat. Somehow you forget, and you used it for whatever, and then all of a sudden, you realize you cooked a burger in it, and now it's meat. So you can wait 24 hours, kosher, and go back to parve. You can do that, but again, Kaufman's law is a lot of times you will make a mistake. You won't pay attention, and that's what's going to happen. I'm not saying every single time, but most times that'll be the case. Is there a charge going to make for yourself and put your dishes? Yeah, it's a minimal charge. It's not a lot. Won't be a lot to do it. It's definitely not going to be a lot to do it. It also depends, how many things you have. It could be, it goes by. They have like a what do you call it? A thing that so like forks and knives and things like a net thing that you put in so nothing falls out. Like you have to climb in and get your stuff out, at the bottom. So it depends. It could be cost a certain amount for each one you put in. Not each individual thing, but each individual. And it's not going to cost that much. Bottom line, shouldn't cost that much. Shouldn't cost that much to do. Okay, let me see other questions. But basically, paying someone to clean the water and maintain the whole set. Yeah, a mikveh takes a lot more than that. A mikveh is a full-time thing. They have to make sure the water's clean. They have to make sure there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that go into upkeep. So, they're not out. First of all, to make the thing costs a lot of money. Make a mikveh in general is tens of thousands of dollars, right? To make it. It's a huge expense. Right? So when they make a mikvah, they're going to make a keli mikvah also, a mikvah for vessels, right? For plates, pans, pots, whatever, right? Right? But they're going to invest in both at the same time, right? Once they already have the mikvah for men and women, they'll have that as well, right? But it's a huge expense. I mean, they have to raise a lot of money, right? And in order to do it, so the money going in is just for upkeep. That's all it is. By the way, going to rabbinical court, some charge more, some charge less. But again, it's, they're not charging an arm and a leg. They're certainly, they're certainly not. Obviously their time is worth something. So, a standard fee, a person should say, registration, whatever, it costs a few $100, right? Probably at most rabbinical courts. Right, I would say being generous, probably not much more than that. I'd say between $300 and $500 probably to start the process and everything else. Somewhere in that range. But again, these judges also also need taken care of. They're taking their time. They're making their effort. However often they do it, doesn't matter. Even if they hear your case and they're in touch with you and they don't see you again for another 2 months, so that you're not going to have to pay every time. Right, you're not going to have to pay every time. It's certainly a startup fee, or whatever. But there are other expenses, So but that's not the only thing they're doing. They're also they have litigants and all kinds of things. So time is worth something. Um, yeah. Someone here mentions, "Bro can't wait to find an excuse to say see Jews true loudly." Yeah, that's true. But guess what? You know what? They can say it about anybody. Just because I'd say there are worse things. The worst things that Jews do than chewing gum. A lot worse. Yeah. I'll give one example. There's certain industries that if people know you're an Orthodox Jew, stay away from you. Because Orthodox Jews, have given it a bad name. There are a number of industries like that. That's a chil Hashem. That's an absolute desecration of God's name. Yeah, not necessarily in the literal sense. But that people are going to say, oh, see, Jews scam me this way, scam me that way, scam me the other way. That's worse. Right. I agree. We don't want to give non-Jews or secular Jews any ammunition whatsoever to say anything against Judaism. Right. One thing for sure, we don't give them any ammunition whatsoever. Right? You want to think they're gonna say, oh, these Jews, look how they chew gum. On a list of one to 10 is probably about 250,000, 220. That's not even on the top 10 list, not even close. What they're gonna say negatively against Jews. Right? I might exaggerate that high number, but they're not gonna care. They're like, oh, these Jews, look how they chew gum. You don't think other people chew gum the same way? They look like cows the same way. Right? I don't think that's going to be like the end all to end all. They're going to say, oh, look, Jews chew gum. Look how they are. They got they have a lot better claims. A lot better claims. God forbid what we do wrong in public than chewing gum. Chewing gum was like, yeah, if that's all they said, that we chew like cows, that'd be beautiful. That would be beautiful. Yeah. What do you do with self-hating Jews? Says, what do all Jews smell? I'm like, who? Like, who are you talking about? It's a hot day and people are sweating. What would you like them to do? They don't have to wear so many heavy clothes. Okay, but it's still going to be hot. So if you're wearing a tank top and shorts, right, and it's 100 degrees, right, 35 degrees Celsius, probably more than 100 degrees. Yeah, 35 degrees Celsius. If you're in a tank top and shorts, you're outside for any length of time, you'll be sweating. Yeah. If I'm out there for any length of time, the way I'm dressed, yeah, I'm also going to be sweating. So what's the difference? You're sweating more, using more energy. What's the difference? What do people smell at this point? Yeah. So what's the difference? So you're just being a stupid racist. That's all you're being. Yeah. Yeah. I've heard people make the comment. So I don't know what Jews they came in contact with, but in that basic hygiene, you shouldn't smell. But what do you do? You're outside. It's 150 degrees. It's hot. I was in the synagogue this morning. Air conditioning didn't work. Yeah, it was plenty hot. Yeah, it was a normal place I go to, but okay. Right? I got a plate, which almost never happens. And whatever, I went to pray. It was hot. I'm not going to say it smelled like a locker room. I'm not going to go that far. But what are you going to do? You're wearing a suit. You're wearing the towels. Extra weight, extra heat. And the AC doesn't work. Yeah? Oh, so what are you supposed to do? You're going to sweat. And if you were in a tank top and shorts, guess what? You'd also sweat. So you're going to say, but you'll sweat more. Okay. That's just a stupid thing to say. The racist thing to say, as well. But again, I don't think on the top 10 list, or the top 50 or the top 1,000 is going to be how Jews chew gum outside and how they look. Yeah, I put all the money I don't have on that. Yeah, I can pretty much guarantee that's not going to be an issue. They have plenty of other issues. God forbid that make us look bad. Yeah, way we dress certainly is one of them. How some people act in business is definitely, could actually be, definitely one of them. This, I think, I don't think it matters. I don't think that's what they're going to do, but I would agree. You don't want non-Jews or secular Jews to say anything negative whatsoever, right? They could use it. You're right. They could use it. Say, look at all these Jews, how they chew gum, right? And you have like a whole bunch of people chewing gum. Okay. It's going to be that common? No, you're right. I would agree. You don't want to give them any information, you don't want to give them anything to say about anything, right? You do not want to give them any ammunition. That's the word. You don't want to give them any ammunition whatsoever. So you're right in this case also. But again, it's not a top 10 list. It's not a top 50 list either. Yeah, and if it would happen, it would be desecration of God's game. You're right. You're right. But it's with anything that you shouldn't do that makes you look bad. Okay. Again, they'll find many, many, many other things, more than that. Someone is donating to let me see, to Chabad House. Okay, yeah, why not? Certainly donate to them. They need all the help. They definitely need all the help as well, even though Chabad is known to be the greatest fundraisers in the world. I'll take my hat off to them. But yeah, they're on their own. They always need help, right? They definitely always need help. What, you saying 300, 500 for conversion? Or like 800, 1200 minimally? Okay. That could be. I'm not saying altogether. I'm saying it's an initial thing. When you sign out the paperwork, they may ask you for 150, 200, 300 bucks. Just to fill out the paperwork. I didn't say about anything else. I didn't say anything about they're going to make you pay however many times you come. I'm not talking about the end where the mikvah costs are. Yeah, the mikvah costs could be, a few $100 also, more. I'm just talking about the initial payment to get your foot in the door of the rabbinical court, of the basin. That easily costs you 300 bucks. Yeah, definitely could cost you 300 bucks or more. I didn't say that's the whole process, right? The whole process is going to cost that. I didn't say that. I'm saying it probably, it's going to cost more. You're right. Again, some people will charge more, some people will charge less, but I'm only talking about the initial fee. That's all I was talking about. Somebody asks, it's frowned upon when Orthodox Jewish women run for public office. This is a whole discussion. Because it's someone in New York. It's an Orthodox woman who works as a judge. She's a judge. And there's been a lot of controversy. Whether, forget a woman, whether a man should be a judge. Should an Orthodox man be a judge? Yeah, in secular court. Yeah, really, it's forbidden. Yeah, if they're judging things like, money issues and that, this and that, right? If it's for non-Jews, is one thing. If Jews come in, 2 Jews come in, not allowed to go to secular court. There are a lot of issues. Therefore, one of their modesty issues, other things I know, again, there's a woman that is a judge, from woman, that is a Orthodox woman, that's a judge. I know there are people hammered it, for taking this job. So yeah, it's problematic in a lot of ways. Someone asks, we're allowed to donate blood, why not? I have anemia, so I've had blood transfusions. Is that a problem? If it's not dangerous, it's definitely not dangerous, then you can, not a problem. Definitely, unless you have other issues, right? A person, let's say the person's anemic, they can't give blood. It's a good thing to give blood if you can, right? But if you can't, then you're okay. Someone asked 7 years of tribulation, 7 goods. Talking about the dream, Pharaoh's dream. Could that be 7 years of tribulation? Who said you go through 7 years? Things change all the time. Usually trials and tribulations don't last that long. At least the same one. Yeah, I went through one for about 20 years. I know someone told me he's gone through one more than 50 years. Okay. Yeah, one trial. But, we have ups and downs all the time. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. It doesn't have to be on that scale. Does not have to be on that scale where 7 years are bad, 7 years are good. We have ups and downs all the time. All the time. The trials, sometimes they're better. Sometimes they're harder, sometimes they're easier, right? Sometimes, we benefit tremendously. Sometimes we get sick, sometimes other things. Usually they don't last that long. Some of them can last 7 years. No, they not. Sometimes they last longer. Depends what it is. But most people get multiple trials all the time. So the multiple trials that you get, they don't last forever. They certainly don't last forever. But it doesn't go in a cycle like, for these years it's very good, right? And then these years are really bad. It's usually a mixture. It's the way it normally works. You have ups and downs, right? Hopefully we have more ups than downs, but it doesn't go in that type of cycle, usually. Usually. Doesn't mean you're going to be down for 7 years and all of a sudden you're going to be on a high for 7 years. Doesn't mean that. Right? Not usually. So you want to tell me you'll store all the all the food, very good. Okay, right? So in that place they had a trial for 7 years, right? 7 years is going to be famine, right? And then you're gonna have you have to store all the 7 years of plenty, then it'll be 7 years of famine. Okay. Well, most people it doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't mean you're gonna have 7 years, everything's bad, and 7 years everything's good. Usually, even when things are good, there are things that are bad, right? There's a mixture. There's always a mixture, right? A person, livelihood could go well, other things could go well, and they have health issues, or they have something with their kids, or something with their spouse, or something with their family, right? I can tell you, when I didn't have livelihood issues, there are all kinds of other issues. God saves a lot of this for me. I mean, I'm not saying just me. There are plenty of issues to deal with. Plenty of issues. Okay, so livelihood wasn't one of them. Very good. But imagine if you have them all together. You have livelihood, you have health, you have to deal with your kids, you got to deal with other things all at once. It's like overkill. It's like how much can a person take? But it's not always like that. Sometimes it just comes in bunches. Yeah, difficulty just comes like one after another. Like seems like it never stops. Right? But you got to think it's not always bad. Right? Not always bad. Looks bad. Feels bad. Right? But other things that are good. So it's not always, it's like I'm just always looking the eye of the needle and that's all it is. Right? Usually it's a mixture. Right? You have ups, you have downs. Maybe you have more downs than ups sometimes. Okay. Right? But it's never like, I'm not going to say a question of being equal. Right? The issue is there are ups and downs. That's for sure. 100% there are ups and downs. Yeah. But to say it's downhill for like the last 10 years. Everything's downhill. Well, look at your life. Do you have health issues? Let's say you didn't have health issues. No. Major health issues. No. You had food. Well, yeah, sometimes it's better, sometimes not. Were you starving? No. Did you have a roof over your head? Even if it doesn't belong to you? Yes. So it's not all bad. It's the question how you look at it. Right? But usually, we'll say it goes in cycles, right? But again, there's going to be good with the bad also. Even though the whole time says nothing bad comes from God, just the way we see it. Right? But people get multiple tries, right? That's for sure. Right? All the time. All the time, no one's exempt. No one's exempt. So, as I mentioned before, when I had plenty of money, that wasn't my trial. I had millions of other trials. Millions of other trials. Yeah. So that's what it is. So, you can have all these trials and you have livelihood issues. You can have health issues with them. You can have, but it's not always bad. It's ups and downs. That's the way it works. Right? It's usually ups and downs. Somebody asked what are our thoughts on having a separate kitchen for Pesach, for a separate Passover kitchen. Be beautiful. You could do it. If you can have a separate kitchen, yeah, be a lot easier. Someone that does. It's very easy. They lock it up all year round. So they don't have to kasher. They shut down their regular kitchen. They go to their other kitchens. Very easy. Yeah, but certainly here in Israel, it's harder to do because you normally don't have as much space. Right? But if you have enough space, it'd be, if you have the money, it'd be worthwhile to do. 100%. Would I invest in that over other things? Maybe not. Right? Depends. I'd invest in having 2 ovens before I do that. Or maybe, think about having a dishwasher before I did that, or maybe some other things, but it's, you can certainly do it. If a person can do it and you have the money to do it, it's great. It'd be a lot easier to do. Any other questions? Oops. 1 second. See if there are other questions. Yeah, any other questions? These are purchase land in Israel. All you need is 3 things. Purchase land in Israel. One is gelt, one is kesef, one is money. And they all mean the same thing. If you have money, you can purchase anything. Really, non-Jews shouldn't be allowed to buy property here, but you certainly can if you have money. Person wants to have a vacation place here. I mean, it depends where you go. Certainly, if you want to live in a ultra-Orthodox area, you're going to pay the price. I mean, it's it's going to cost more than if you go further out. But it is kind of funny living in a war zone. Prices have only gone up. Never really smoothed out. You would think after all these years, price would stabilize or whatever. So where I live is big in demand. So I've been here 17 years, price has gone up 3 times. 3 times the amount, buy a house. Or let's say better, buy an apartment. Not too many houses here. Right? So, if you have money, you can do it. So you're asking me, is it easy? It depends where you want to go. Right? It depends where you want to live. You get a lawyer, you get, someone knows what they're doing. Shouldn't be a problem. Right? You just need the money to do it. Yeah, any other questions? All right, I'm going to stop here. I do this every Saturday, 2:30 Eastern Time, 9:30 Israel time. I want to thank all the well-wishers back on the mend. I can't keep you down for long. Otherwise, anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Klein Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There are videos and Q&As. Ethics Power Fathers, Book of Leviticus, going to do that tomorrow, 9 o'clock. I haven't put it up yet, but it's going to be 9 o'clock tomorrow. Eastern time. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFF